Aliens stunned by the human battleship. That defies all logic. The Vareth fleet opened fire before the Solari had time to scatter. Admiral Keth Vara watched 3 of his escort ships tear apart in the first volley and did not waste time on grief. He had 14 minutes before the Vareth second wave completed its flanking arc, and 14 minutes was exactly 11 minutes. Too long for this to go the way it was going. His communications officer pressed 2 fingers to a relay node. The distress signal went through coalition channels. Confirmed receipt. Response: 1 ship, human designation Earth. Federation ship Goliath, jump trajectory. Puts arrival in 40 seconds. Keth Vara had never worked with humans before. He knew what the briefing files said about them: aggressive, adaptable, biologically unusual in ways that made other species vaguely uncomfortable. He did not know what their ships looked like. He was about to find out. The jump point opened 42,000 kilometers off the Solari defensive line, and the thing that came through it made Keth Vara's tactical officer actually step back from her station. It was enormous. Not enormous the way a dreadnought was. Enormous, long and sleek, and deliberately overwhelming. This was enormous the way a mountain was. Enormous, wide, asymmetrical, built-in sections that did not appear to belong to the same design philosophy or possibly the same century. Its hull was layered in plates of varying thickness, some smooth, some studded with projections that had no obvious tactical function. Its engine array was not centered on the ship's axis. Its main weapon emplacement was not where any reasonable naval architect would have put it. There were structures bolted to its upper hull that looked, to Keth Vara's experienced eye, like additions made after original construction was complete, reinforced, integrated into a vessel that had already been finished, as if the builders had kept changing their minds long after the first hull plate was welded. It had no elegance whatsoever. It had a name stenciled across its forward section in large human letters, and Keth Vara's translation unit rendered it plainly Goliath. On the open coalition channel, a human voice came through, calm, unhurried, the kind of voice that had clearly given orders under fire before and had never found the need to raise it. "This is Captain Owen Drake of the Earth Federation ship Goliath. We have your coordinates. Advise all Solari vessels to hold current positions and let us through." Keth Vara opened the channel. "Captain Drake, the Varath fleet numbers 47 vessel. They are armed with Tier 6 pulse cannons and shielded to hegemony. Standard grade. Your vessel appears to be single." "That is correct," Drake said. "And you intend to engage the entire Varath fleet?" "That is also correct." A short silence. "Admiral, with respect," Drake said, "I suggest you get your remaining ships out of the middle of what is about to happen." Keth Vara pulled the Solari formation back 3,000 km in under a minute. He would think later about why he did not argue. Something in the human's voice. Not arrogance, something quieter than arrogance, certainty that had no performance in it. The Goliath moved into the space the Solari vacated. The Varath fleet turned toward it. On every Solari vessel still operational, crew members left secondary stations and moved to any screen with a visual feed. Something about the human ship, even at distance, even knowing nothing about human engineering, something told you that whatever was about to happen, you wanted to see it. The Vareth fired first. 47 ships, layered volley fire, the kind of opening barrage that had broken Solari defensive lines twice in the past 3 years. Pulse cannon round the size of small vehicles, energy discharge that measured in numbers that made tactical computers pause before displaying them. It hit the Goliath like a wave hitting a cliff. The shields flared, not the even geometric bubble of Solari shielding, but something layered and uneven, brightening in different sections at different times, absorbing and redirecting in a pattern that Keth, Vareth's chief tactical analyst, would spend 3 hours later trying to model. Without success. The Goliath shook. It did not stop moving. Its return fire came from 4 different emplacements simultaneously in a spread pattern aimed at 4 different ships in 4 different sectors of the Vareth formation, not the nearest ships, not the most dangerous ships, 4 ships chosen by criteria that were not immediately obvious. 2 of the 4 Vareth ships lost propulsion, 1 lost its weapons array, 1 suffered a shield collapse across its port side section. The Vareth formation shifted, tightened, began the coordinated response that had destroyed 3 Solari vessels in under a minute. Keth Vareth watched the Goliath accelerate into the gap between the Vareth flanking wings. His tactical officer turned to him. Her expression did not require translation. "It is going into the middle of them," she said. "Yes," he said. "That is not standard engagement doctrine." "No," he said, "it is not." The Goliath went into the middle of the Vareth fleet, and the battle stopped making sense. No vessel designed by Solari engineers, or Vareth engineers, or any of the 12 species that made up the coalition fleet would have done what the Goliath did next. Keth Vareth's tactical officer pulled the sensor data 3 times because she was convinced the instruments were malfunctioning. The Goliath was being hit from every direction simultaneously. 6, 7, 8 Vareth ships firing at point-blank range in a coordinated crossfire that should have reduced it to scattered debris in under 30 seconds. This was not theoretical assessment. Keth Vareth had personally watched this exact formation destroy a coalition heavy cruiser 3 months ago. He still remembered the sound the wreckage made on the long-range audio feed. The Goliath shields were cycling through failure states in sections and then recovering, not all at once in pieces, as if the ship was deliberately letting some areas go dark while pushing power to others, trading hits against a calculation that was not about survival in the way survival was normally calculated. Its power distribution makes no sense. His analyst said, "It is drawing more power to its port side midsection, even though that is not where the heaviest fire is concentrated. It is pre-routing power to where the hits are going to come from." Keth Vareth stared at the display. "It is predicting their targeting patterns. The algorithm would have to be processing about 400 variables per second to manage that. Can your system do that?" She did not answer. She did not need to. Inside the Vareth formation, the Goliath was not behaving like a vessel trying to escape or survive or fight its way clear. It was moving in a slow, deliberate arc through the middle of the fleet, weapons cycling in a rhythm with no pattern Keth Vareth could identify. Every time a Vareth ship adjusted position to get a better firing angle, The Goliath's arc adjusted with it, not reactively, not after the adjustment, but just slightly before. On the Goliath's bridge, Lieutenant Nora Blake called damage reports without looking up from her targeting array. Portside shield layer 3 is down to 60%. Engineering says 20 seconds to restore. Tell them 15, Captain Owen Drake said. From the command chair. Hull breach in Section 14, automated. Systems are handling it. Good, target the Varath command vessel. Propulsion only, do not destroy it. Nora looked up at that. You want to disable it. A disabled command ship cannot give orders, but it can still receive them. A destroyed command ship tells every other captain they are on their own, and they stop following a battle plan. I want them following their plan. Drake's eyes moved across the tactical hologram with the unhurried focus of someone reading something they had read before. Their plan is the problem. The round that left the Goliath's forward cannon was precisely calibrated. It struck the Varath command vessel, its drive section, with enough force to take out thrust capacity and nothing else. The command ship slowed, held position, continued broadcasting orders. The Varath formation tightened further, concentrated, exactly as Drake had predicted it would. He was not fighting them, he was arranging them. 12 Varath ships were now within a 3,000 km radius of the Goliath, all of them firing, all of them focused on a single target. It was the most concentrated firepower in the battle. It was exactly where Drake wanted it. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Cal Hutton was running on 2 cups of cold coffee and the particular kind of energy that came from a ship being worked at its absolute limit. The Goliath was his in every way that mattered. He had not designed her. Nobody alive had designed her alone. But he knew every bolt, every relay, every junction in her hull the way musician knew an instrument built by a different person that had somehow become theirs anyway. She was performing right now, not struggling, performing. The ship had been built by a committee. That was the official story, and it was accurate, and it was the thing that made every other space-capable species look at the schematics and ask, very politely, if there had been an error in the documentation. Solari ships were designed by a single master architect, specifications locked and approved before the first plate was welded. Varath ships followed a doctrine of uniformity, every vessel in a class identical to every other. Spare parts interchangeable down to the last component. It was efficient. It made logical sense. The Goliath had been designed by 7 engineering teams from 4 different countries on one planet, each given a section of the ship and told to optimize it for their specialty. They had argued constantly. They had each built what they believed was the best possible version of their section, and then those sections had been joined into a whole that looked, from the outside, like the result of a shipbuilding accident. What it actually was redundant, ways that no unified design could be. 6 independent power cores, any one of which could run the whole ship if it had 2, 3 weapon systems that shared no targeting hardware, so jamming one left the others untouched. A shield architecture so layered and irregular that no single point on the hull was covered by just one system, and no single system could be taken down to leave a clean gap. The Varuth had been hammering the same points in the hull for 4 minutes. Their targeting algorithms found the weakest areas in the Goliath shield, pattern and concentrated fire on them. What those algorithms could not account for was a ship whose weakest points changed every time, managed by human beings making live judgment calls rather than automated systems following set protocols. Cal had 6 people on his team, and they were all talking at once, which was exactly how he preferred it. Reroute 6 into 7, pull drive power from the secondary array and feed it to mid-hull shields. Pete, the junction in Section 22 is going to fail in about 2 minutes. Get ahead of it, Lucy. I need propulsion at 110% for 30 seconds. Starting now. The Goliath shuddered and accelerated. Kethvara watched the human ship break out of the concentrated Varuth formation the same way it had entered it, through the middle of them, and emerge on the far side with weapons still cycling and hull still in one piece. He had been watching fleet engagements for 32 years. He had no category for what he had just seen, and the absence of a category was, in itself, the most unsettling thing that had happened to him all day. The Varith commander sent a new order across the fleet. Kethvarith's communications officer picked up the coded signal, and the translation came back with a phrase he had not heard used in a field engagement before: total suppression protocol. They were going to stop trying to destroy the human ship with precision and simply put enough firepower into a defined region of space that nothing inside it could function. 31 Varith ships repositioned in under 90 seconds. The other 12 held the flanks. They formed a hemisphere of fire around the Goliath, the most coordinated offensive posture in their fleet doctrine and on every Sulari vessel. Watching the tactical feed, crew members who understood what they were looking at began speaking quietly to the people beside them. On the bridge, a young officer named Ben Harrow, who had been running calculations at the secondary station for 20 minutes without a word, looked up. Captain, I have the targeting pattern. Drake turned. Tell me. Their rotation cycles every 4 minutes. The priority algorithm assigns fire concentration based on previous shield performance, but the algorithm takes 4 minutes to update if we change our shield distribution significantly every 3 minutes and 50 seconds. Their targeting data is always a cycle behind. Drake looked at Nora. She was already running the numbers. It works, but it means our port side forward section will be deliberately under-protected for about 40 seconds per cycle. 40 seconds is enough for them to concentrate significant fire through an under-protected section, Ben said. He said it as simple fact. He had that quality calm that came not from inexperience, but from having already decided exactly where he stood. Yes, Drake agreed, so we make sure they do. Both officers looked at him. Section 14 already has the breach. Engineering is handling, Drake said. It is also where our second weapons array junction is housed. If they put concentrated fire through a 40-second window into a section they believe is under-protected, they will use their best munitions. Their best munitions are the Tier 7 penetrators. Those penetrators burn through in a straight line. They do not scatter. He pulled up the specifications on the hologram. If we angle the whole geometry in Section 14 to create a reflective cavity, Nora said, we would be turning their own best rounds into a secondary weapon against their flank ships. Cal, Drake said into the intercom. I need Section 14's outer hull plates at a 40 degrees inward angle in the next 6 minutes. A pause from the engine room. Cal's voice came back flat and deliberate. You want me to shape active battle damage into a deflection array? Yes. A longer pause. I want that in writing, Cal said. When they ask at the inquiry how a ship's captain deliberately configured battle damage as an offensive weapon structure, I want documentation that this was not my idea. Noted, Drake said. 6 minutes, Cal. The Goliath stopped evading. Kethvara saw the shift and did not understand it. The human ship's movement had been complex and deliberate since the moment it entered the battle, not random but layered in a way that suggested deep design rather than desperate reaction. Now it was holding a relative position inside the Vareth hemisphere, still maneuvering but contained. The total suppression protocol opened up. The space around the Goliath went bright. With it, sensors could not distinguish individual impacts. It was a continuous wall of energy, a concentration that should have broken the ship apart in seconds. It lasted 3 minutes and 48 seconds. At 3 minutes and 48 seconds, the Goliath's shield distribution changed. Section 14 opened. The Vareth algorithm flagged it. Reassigned priority fire from 5 ships to the exposed section and launched its Tier 7 penetrators. The rounds went in. They came out the other side, traveling at angles that a Vareth tactical officer watching his own fleet sensors would later describe in his post-engagement report as geometrically improbable. 3 Vareth ships on the far flank of the hemisphere took hits in their engine sections from their own munitions. 1 lost power entirely, 2 went to emergency protocols and pulled their weapons offline to stabilize. The hemisphere had a gap in it, 3 ships wide, in the direction the Goliath immediately began to move. It moved without speed. The Goliath never moved with speed. It moved with the unhurried momentum of something very heavy that had made a decision and was not going to be argued out of it. In the engine room, Lucy Marsh ran propulsion calibrations and talked to herself the way she always did when the ship was being pushed, a quiet technical commentary that helped her think and helped her catch errors before they became problems. Port thrust at 88, starboard at 91. Compensating for shield power drain on the secondary bus, keeping the power gap below 4% because anything above that and the rotation cycle breaks, and then we are flying in a straight line and flying in a straight line in the middle of a fleet engagement is a very short career decision. Lucy, Cal said. Still here, propulsion is holding. Good. The ship went through the gap. The VAR commander did something then that Kethvara had not seen in 3 years of fighting them. He called the fleet to a full halt. Not a repositioning, not a tactical pause to reassign fire sectors. Complete halt, every ship dropping to minimum propulsion, the barrage stopping. For the first time since the battle began, the VAR commander was thinking. This was a bad sign. The VAR at their most dangerous were not the ones firing everything they had. The VAR at their most dangerous were they ones who had encountered something outside their model and were taking 20 seconds to build a new framework around it. The pause lasted 17 seconds. Then the formation restructured into 3 equal groups, each taking a different spatial axis, above, below, and lateral, spreading into a three-dimensional envelope that offered no exit line that did not pass through. Group, no hemisphere, a sphere. Kethvara had seen this formation used once against a malfunctioning coalition vessel that was drifting unpredictably. It was not a battle formation, it was a containment formation, the Vareth, equivalent of surrounding something and waiting for it to run out of room. Kethvara opened the channel. Captain Drake, they are forming a containment sphere. If they complete it, your maneuvering space will be insufficient. I see it, Drake said. Is your fleet in a condition to move? Kethvara checked his status board. 10 ships operational, 2 heavy cruisers. Still intact. Partially, he said. Your 2 heaviest vessels, I need them to apply pressure on the lower axis. Group, not to destroy them, not to engage at full strength, just make them feel the need to respond. If I do that, my cruisers will be in the line of fire between the lower axis. Group, and your position. Yes, Drake said briefly. Kethvara looked at the tactical display for a long moment. Then he gave the order. The 2 Solari cruisers moved. They were slower than they should have been. Damage, reduced crew, 3 years of hard fighting in hulls that had been repaired too many times, but they were large ships moving toward you. In a battle, demand a response. The lower axis group shifted its formation angle by 11 degrees to account for the new pressure. 11 degrees did not look significant on a display. In the physical space the Goliath was operating in. And GT snorts. And GT. It was a corridor 1,800 km wide. The Goliath moved into that corridor and ran parallel to the lower axis group at a range that made Kethvara's analyst reach up and cover her mouth, because 900 km was knife range by fleet engagement standards. At 900 km, the Vareth ships could not use their main cannons without the deflection angle, sending missed shots into their own formation. They were forced to their close engagement. Weapons, shorter range, lower yield. The Goliath took those hits without slowing, and while the lower axis group was managing the Goliath at 900 km off their flank, they were also managing the Solari cruisers pressing from below. 2 targets. Everything in Vareth fleet doctrine was built around focused fire on a single priority. 1 target, maximum concentration. Destroy it, move to the next. It was the foundation of every tactic they used, and it had worked for a century. 2 targets broke the algorithm. Ben Harrow looked up from his calculations. Captain, if we reduce speed by 30% for 90 seconds on the current heading. Drake had already seen it. We let them get ahead of us. The leading edge of the lateral group will overshoot our position. They will be realigning when we cut through. Nora said, cutting through puts us directly under their ventral sections. That is their most heavily armored zone. Yes, Ben said. He let that sit for a second. Their ventral sections are also where their emergency power conduits run external to the hull, because no one has ever needed to armor them before. No. Fleet doctrine calls for attacks from directly below in a full engagement. The angle is too dangerous for the attacker. He said it with the quiet focus of someone who had been right about things his whole life without ever finding the need to announce it until now. Do it, Drake said. The Goliath slowed. The lateral group overshot by 93 seconds and realized it 11 seconds too late. In the engine room, a hit to the upper hull rattled every loose object on the deck and sent one of Cal's technicians hard into the wall. Peta, I am fine. Junction in Section 9 is holding, minor feedback spike isolated. Cal ran his eyes across all panels. Ship was working, all of it all at once, every system feeding into every other system, the way the designers had insisted it would, and the critics had said it could not, and the engineers who actually built it had simply shrugged and said they would see. They were seeing. He rerouted power from non-essential thermal management, brought a failed shield layer back up at 70% in 40 seconds, and said nothing to Drake about it. Problems that were already being solved did not need reporting. The Goliath cut under the lateral group's ventral sections. The power conduits running external to those holes did not survive the contact. 4 more Vareth ships went dark. The battle ended 40 minutes after it started. Not with a dramatic final shot, not with an explosion that lit every tactical screen. It ended the way decisive battles ended, with a decision made by one side that continuing was no longer viable. 7 Vareth ships had been destroyed outright. 14 were crippled and incapable of offensive action. The command vessel, still running on reduced thrust, was broadcasting a withdrawal signal that the rest of the fleet was already obeying. They left. Kithvara watched them go for a long time. Then he looked at the Goliath sitting in the space where the Vareth formation had been, turning slowly on its axis in what he would later learn was a routine post-engagement sensor sweep. It was still exactly as large and exactly as strange-looking as it had been when it arrived. Its hull showed damage in 17 locations. None of it had stopped it. All of it was already being actively repaired by systems that apparently never stopped working even while the ship was in combat. He opened the channel. Captain Drake. Admiral. I have been in fleet engagements for 32 years. He paused, searching for a word that fit and finding none. I have never seen a ship fight the way yours just did. Thank you, Admiral. I do not mean it purely as a compliment. I need to understand what I witnessed. For the report alone, I need to understand it. I will come aboard, Drake said. Give me 1 hour. He came aboard with Cal Hutton, which Kithvara had not expected, and which told him something immediately about how Drake understood his own ship, not as a weapon he commanded, but as something he and Cal Hutton together were responsible for knowing completely. Cal Hutton was roughly the age of Kithvara's senior technicians, wearing a uniform that showed clear evidence of a very active past few hours, carrying a data tablet the way some people carried a necessary limb. They sat at the briefing room display table, and Kithvara said, "Explain your ship to me." Drake looked at Cal. Cal pulled up the schematics. Kithvara had seen the external hull. The schematics were somehow more surprising or more honest. He was immediately sure which. The Goliath was built in sections by 7 independent engineering teams. Cal said, no apology in his voice, no defense, a simple statement of fact. Each team was given performance objectives and told to meet them by whatever means they judged best. Teams disagreed on almost everything. They agreed on the objectives. Kethvar's chief tactical analyst. Koravel leaned forward. The result looks like several different ships assembled together. Yes, Cal said, that is because it is. And this is by design. It is now, Cal said, the first version of this concept was an accident. During initial trials we found that overlapping, inconsistent systems were significantly harder to target than unified ones. Targeting algorithms are built around consistent behavior. If a ship's shields always respond the same way to the same input, you can predict the response and concentrate fire accordingly. Our ship responds differently every time because the teams who designed each section did not coordinate their response protocols. The variance is structural. It is built into the disagreement between the designers. You cannot model it out because it is not a flaw to be corrected. It is the design. Koravel said, you are telling me your engineers' inability to agree with each other became a tactical advantage. We use the word diverse, Cal said. Engineers prefer it. Kethvar looked at the schematics for a long moment. The propulsion array, every ship we have encountered in 300 years of space travel coalition, Vareth, any species centers its propulsion on the vessel's axis. It creates the most efficient thrust line. Most efficient, yes, Cal said. Also most predictable. Centered propulsion means your minimum energy turns follow a predictable arc. An opponent's targeting model accounts for those arcs automatically. Off-center propulsion means our efficient thrust lines do not match what the opponent's model expects. We maneuver in ways that look incorrect on a tactical display because they are incorrect by standard engineering theory. They still work. They simply cost more fuel. And you accept that cost. We carry more fuel than any other ship class of comparable size, Cal said. That was the contribution of the fuel systems team. They built the largest tanks anyone would authorize and then argued for slightly larger ones until the oversight committee gave up. Nora Blake, standing against the wall with her arms crossed, said, the Vera spent 40 minutes trying to apply doctrine to a ship that was not built from doctrine. Every time their model told them we should break, we did not. Every time it told them we could not do something, we did it. After a while, you are not fighting a battle anymore. You are fighting someone's inability to update their assumptions, and people lose that fight faster than they lose any other kind. Kath Vareth looked at her steadily. She held the look without shifting. The most dangerous thing in a battle, she said, is not a weapon you have never encountered before. It is a ship that does not fit in the category you put it in. The moment you assign it a category, you have already started making errors. Drake said, the Goliath was designed by people who spent a long time losing wars on the ground before we reached space. We learned at significant cost that elegant unified systems break cleanly, eliminate the key node, and everything connected to it fails at once. We built a ship with no key nodes. You can keep removing sections and it keeps functioning because every section was already designed to operate without the others. Kethvara sat with that for a moment. Then he said, this is how you approach all of it, not just the ship. Drake did not answer right away. He looked at the schematics, at the asymmetrical outline, the overlapping layers, the off-center engine array, the 6 independent cores distributed across the frame like load-bearing arguments. that had never been fully resolved. We have been in conflict with each other for most of our history, he said. We do not have one way of doing things. We have 20 different ways, and we argue about which one is correct, and we never fully settle it. For a long time we believed that was a weakness. He paused. It turns out to be the only kind of strength that is genuinely difficult to plan against. You cannot model a disagreement, you can only encounter it. Kethvara was quiet for a long time. He thought about the Vareth 17-second pause, about the sphere formation, the most sophisticated containment tactic in their entire doctrine, and about the 11-degree gap that had opened in it because two worn Solari cruisers had applied pressure at the right moment, at the right angle, because a human captain had asked for exactly that pressure without explaining why, and Kethvara had given it on nothing more than the certainty in a voice he had heard for less than 2 minutes. He thought about what that meant, about why he had listened. They will study this engagement, he said. The Vareth adapt slowly, but they do adapt. They will adjust their doctrine. Yes, Drake said. And when they have adjusted, we will have already changed, Drake said. Staying the same is not something we do well. It has caused us considerable difficulty over the centuries. It is also, we have found, occasionally useful. Kethvara was a formal man. 32 years of service built on the understanding that there was a correct way to approach most things, and that the correct way generally resembled the way it had always been done, because the way it had always been done had gotten them this far. He looked at the Goliath schematics one more time, at the impossible patchwork of it, at the 6 cores in the asymmetric array and the layered shields that responded to no model he possessed. He made 2 decisions. The first was that he would write a very detailed report recommending the Coalition Fleet Doctrine Committee arrange a formal consultation with Earth's engineering divisions at the earliest possible opportunity. The second was that he would not put the other thing in any report, because it was not the kind of observation that belonged in documentation. It was the kind of observation you carried privately and thought about over a long time until it changed the way you saw other things. The most dangerous thing in a battle is not a weapon you have never encountered before. It is a ship that does not fit in the category you put it in. He stood. He extended his hand the way Drake had extended his when they met, the human grip, that strange custom of clasping and moving another person's hand, which had always seemed peculiar to him, and which he had practiced twice in the corridor before entering so that he would do it correctly. Drake shook it without comment. Kethvara watched the 3 humans return to their shuttle and then went to his observation deck and stood at the real space viewer for a few minutes, looking at the Goliath where it hung in the dark against the debris of a battle. It had not been expected to survive. It was not a beautiful ship. It did not look like victory. It did not look like anything he had a word for. It looked like a fight that had decided. It was not finished yet. He found, somewhat to his own surprise, that he understood it. He turned from the viewer and went back to work.